Hi there. So, first of all, I'd like to ask you all, have you ever felt the fear of someone looking at you through your webcam? If you've ever felt the fear of someone logging your keystrokes on your keyboard or accessing your personal data, if you've ever felt the fear of a virus on your computer, and if so, I would like to keep that fear in mind while we talk about video games, specifically horror ones. Now, kind of set the stage, I'm going to talk about films for a little bit because they have also been a major influence on the aesthetics of horror games, as we can see here with Puppet Combo's Stay Out of the House, quite a famous indie game. Now, why is horror interesting? Well, sorry. Now, horror is interesting because it's a reflection of our culture. Media has the ability to show us where we're at, our culture, our politics, our fears. Now, we can think, for example, back to Godzilla, 1954 disaster film, and it showed the horrors of the atomic bomb. We can use that all the way up to the kind of killers of the 70s to the 90s slasher films, and how the killers begin to come into our domestic space and affect our sense of space. Macaulay in 1998 wrote a paper on this called When Screen Violence is Not Attractive, and cites curiosity and fascination theory. And really, the clue is in the name. We are fascinated by transgressions of the norm. We are fascinated by our spaces being invaded. For example, the prelude to this game, called Night Shift, is a fantastic, really short 15-minute game, and you basically work in a convenience store and nothing happens for, say, 14 minutes and 59 seconds, and it is absolutely petrifying the whole way through because you are so suspicious of something hitting you every second. You know something is off, a strange van is circling outside, and you are so conscious that something is going to happen, and it uses that sense of space, establishing it and exploiting it. Now, when space becomes a norm, these norms change, whether politically, socially, or aesthetically. We begin to see this change emerging in the 90s in film with the kind of establishment of Japanese horror, with films like One Missed Call or Cairo, also known as Pulse, where ghosts kind of haunt through screens. Now, there are countless films that use horror because technology has been firmly established in the use of horror. For example, Chatroom, Searching, and Unfriended. Just need to get the IMDb scores up for a lot of them, sadly. Now, just for a second, I'd like to consider one in particular, Unfriended. You might have heard of it. So it was basically a kind of horror film set on a standard computer desktop screen as we know of, and it was about these teens being haunted by a malevolent spirit, and everyone criticised it, saying, why can't they just turn the computer off? And this is a very flawed critique of the film because the ghost would get them if they turned it off. But I think it's a really interesting assumption that I'd like you all to keep in mind. It's our assumption of power over technology. And now let's move on to games, especially self-aware ones. Now, why are they important? Well, they're just as great for cultural reflection as any other medium, and they utilise the horror genre amazingly through that form of interaction, especially cyber horror. And this is because of games' inherent use of modern tech in their makeup. It's usually flooded into their narrative a lot of the time. They're usually quite at the forefront of it. So it usually involves interaction with the fourth wall. Now, what is the fourth wall? Well, it is basically it's a form of address. It's a motif used in all different kinds of arts, from books to paintings even, to film and television. And what it is it's a form of direct address to the reader, showing that the work is self-aware of its own existence as a piece of art media. A really famous example is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, wherein he addresses you, the audience, directly. Now, games interact with the fourth wall in a very different way. Stephen Conway in 2010 wrote a brilliant paper called A Circular Wall, Reformulating the Fourth Wall for Video Games. Because video games don't break the fourth wall, they move along a spectrum of awareness of the player. Because you think about it, you start a tutorial for a game, it immediately tells you how to move. It is aware of you as a player. It gives you an options screen. It gives you information on what level you're on. If you've died, it is constantly aware of you, and it can push back and forth, and it can expand and contract in that awareness, and that is what Conway argues. So to illustrate, let's look at a game called Welcome to the Game. It's a Brent indie horror game again. It uses a simulated fake desktop interface like the one you use on your daily computer. It's a first-person game, so you look through the character's eyes. And basically, you have to find an illegal hidden website on the hidden internet. And you're traced and tracked by unseen attackers as you do this because they do not want you snooping on their illegal business. So what you have to do is you get signals essentially in your virtual house that the attackers are around. So when you do, you have to turn off all your lights and essentially hide, turn the computer off so they can't suspect you and find you. However, It uses one extra device to really immerse you. It utilizes your microphone if it is on. If you make a noise in real life, the attackers will hear it and then they will come and find you and you will get a huge jump scare. So we think about it as an expansion into another device of the game's self-awareness of the player. Another really interesting device, an important one, is file system mechanics. Now, they have a bit of a history going back to 2009 with the art project Lose Lose by Zach Cage. Essentially what it is, your standard spaceship shooter wherein you shoot down little aliens. However, each of those aliens are generated from information on your computer and your desktop. For example, that alien there, the blue one, that could have been a photograph of your desktop, on your desktop. And by the end of the game, basically, if you shoot off aliens, you won't have a computer left. It deletes your actual data. And it was intended to make players reflect upon how we value our data and ask, do we even understand it? And this brings us to our main example, Doki Doki Literature Club, a masterwork of viral horror. It became really popular in 2017 due to its shock tactics. And we can kind of see that here. We can make a lot of aesthetic assumptions about this. It's based on the kind of Japanese kawaii aesthetic, using a lot of anime girls, and it's meant to be warm, inviting, friendly. It's a romance. And it's a visual novel, so we can see the standard setup here. It's text-based, and the images of the characters change depending on what choices you make in that text and how you interact with them. It's basically akin to a choose-your-own-adventure novel. Now, it's a traditional romance that slowly turns into a self-aware horror game, and this is divided into acts. So the first act goes along very smoothly, nothing much happens until the very end of it. Then by the second act, characters begin to glitch out, act strangely towards you, and they are killed off injuring themselves a lot of the time. And by act 3, you learn that it's because of one of the characters, Monica, the girl who was in the last slide. She has become self-aware and manipulated the others and deleted them because she wanted your attention, because she wasn't programmed with a romance route. She is self-aware of her nature as a program. Now, she'll keep you in the room at the very end and talk to you infinitely. Just keep on generating text until it starts to repeat eventually. But what you have to do is to stop her, you have to go into the actual files of where the game is installed, go to her character file up there and delete her actual character file. So story files are also generated as you play in the game as well here, and there are tons of Easter eggs that you can find out. There's a whole database of it online. And what we're seeing is we're seeing a shift of the interface onto the desktop that we use daily. It's an expansion of the awareness narratively as well as into the very makeup of the game. Now, Doki Doki does not affect your entire system like Lose Lose does. It's very much limited to the kind of installation directory. What it does is it affects its boundaries as a game, not as an art project. The game is aimed at PC users and wants to subvert what they know with the file directory as well as their devices. So we can run through a few. For example, when you're at the weekend here, you have to choose who you want to hang out with, and Monica will literally take control of your mouse and push it towards her name, so you have to select her. And if you think about that, your mouse is the fundamental way that you interact with your computer other than your keyboard. And you take that control away, that's pretty frightening, even if you don't quite realize it as you're doing it. And Monica can also detect whether you're using a recording program in the last act as she's talking to you in the room, and she will jump scare you if you do so while saying hi to your streamers. And lastly, she will read the name that's registered on your actual PC. When you start the game, you type in a name and the characters will refer to you as that. However, she bypasses that because she is aware of your nature as a computer user and a player, and she will literally access the name that is registered upon your computer. Now, narrative subversion is cool, but we adapt to it. What is interesting here is the way it's tapping into the file system and the information, because it's interesting because we use it for everything. Now, just kind of a quick consent of data clarification. It's not going to read all your data and steal it all. It's not going to do anything malicious with it. It's a perfectly normal game. Thoroughly recommend that you download it. What it's taking advantage of is user complacency, because these programs that we usually install and just say, yeah, we give it permission to do anything on a computer, these are the basics that it can access, really. And it takes advantage of our complacency with allowing for that. Now, PC desktops are essentially considered to be a metaphorical space in our daily routines, because our kind of older operating systems were all text-based, for example, like MS-DOS, and soon enough, graphics were introduced to make this more accessible for computer users. And we can't really read that programming unless we're taught in programming, know how to use it. And this has led to a kind of fear of viruses and cybercrime in a very particular way, because we fear damage done to our daily spaces that we cannot usually detect. We can't usually see, and we can't usually understand it because a lot of us can't read programming. And so we fear damage to a daily space we rely on function and privacy so much. The space of horror has moved And Doki Doki takes advantage of this by being a blending of the text and the paratext. And paratext is essentially what this game is displayed on. For example, books can be displayed on paper, films can be displayed upon cinema screens. The medium is just as important as the message. Doki Doki acts like malware. It feeds into that medium. It reads data, controls input, and requires users to access directories. Now, again, it's not a virus. It's nothing harmful at all. What's important is that I argue it taps into the same fear that our fear of viruses come from, and that's how it became so viral. It reflects our culture, fitting into our horror traditions, taking advantage of our current fears. Now, to finish off, this kind of horror is terrifying. Games are really good at being terrifying. They can show us how sensitive we are about our levels of control over technology, our data's privacy, and exploit that. We hold so much of our daily lives and technology functioning normally, and interactive horror is ready to show us just how terrifying it is to be without it. Thank you.